Okay, folks, we have the good fortune that Jerry Patterson, the Texas Land Commissioner, got here. Brave floods and everything else. So, we're going to hear from him in a moment. I'll turn the mic over to him. But first of all, let me go ahead and wrap up what I had. And I'll ask him also on, there are others, there are other solutions. And I wish Gary had heard this solution. But there are other modern day solutions that can work for us. We simply have to find them and keep working and make them happen. Now, the solution has to be both political and legal. It can't be generated by any one source. It must be a well-coordinated alliance of action.
Okay.
There are those who hear ideas of this nature and believe they can go it alone. It doesn't work that way. We need to talk more about that in a moment. Of course, the core of our strategy will remain classified until it's time to deliver our tactical solution. Now let's move on to the third question. How are we going to accomplish these goals? The short answer is with sheer determination. Now, so that I don't appear facetious to you, let me give you the long answer. When we view this problem from the standpoint of tried and proven solutions, the success ratio is heavily skewed in favor of the state. Time after time, lawsuit after lawsuit hits a stone wall. Statistically, a tiny number have been successful. So speaking from a logical point of view, does it make sense to continue attacking that stone wall? Without a clear path that followed one of the few litigation successes, I would say, no, it doesn't make any sense to keep hitting the stone wall. My thoughts are to rethink our tactics and strategy. And this is what I found, and of course we just covered one good modern day solution, but let me explain, I think, how we can get there. As I searched through countless websites and documents, I saw many beautifully written works, manuscripts that clearly describe a painful story of how our ancestors were dispossessed of their lands, that they had labored to clear and settle. They created a productive and civilized existence from untamed land, and Lord knows it was untamed when our ancestors first got here. Many of these folks, many of our ancestors were outright murdered, burned out. Those that survived left with only the clothes on the back. We know that to be true among us. But no matter how extensive my search, I couldn't find a clear path to a solution that would work in our case. We talk about bad things, but I found very little material on how to make amends to that bad history that we speak of. A solution with justice that renders the modern day approach, as we discussed a while ago, that would meet least resistance. The radical impact that our ancestors suffered in those changes, the loss of their land, that won't work in today's world. Just because we suffered that does not mean we can impose that upon others in today's world. It won't work. The right solution, which we just discussed in a good example, can make it happen. We'll discuss more of that later in the conference. But so, we beat ourselves against a stone wall with unsuccessful litigation. See many lawsuit dollars go down the drain. In most cases, probably money could have been better spent. We have elected our share of legislators but fall short of a majority vote. So we end up short on both the political and litigation side of things, which are the paths to success. So what options does that leave us in terms of a solution? At this point, I'm going to speak to you in terms that I understand and language that I can explain. I'm going to revert to my military career 20 years where the terms such as tactics and strategy were absolutely essential to success on the battlefield, and I'm going to show you how it applies to what we're doing today. Tactics is how you win battles. Strategy is how you win the war. In effect, if we win enough battles, we win the war. And wouldn't you know that after I left the service, I learned that the same terms apply in nearly every large-scale discipline in the civilian world, whether it be business tactics and strategy, political tactics and strategy, litigation tactics, strategy, economic tactics, in almost every discipline, you can find the terms tactics and strategy applied. So how can we make those work for us? Okay. Let's say that for our purpose, and we're forming an alliance for political advocacy. Tactic is how we win district and state elections. We develop a strategy for that, and we develop the wherewithal with the alliance. Strategy is how we gain control of the House and the Senate, executive House and Senate, sufficiently so to get our laws passed and some of the bad laws changed. And sure enough, when we look at the mission from that perspective, the winning components are total numbers of votes. Just like military applications, total number of soldiers win battles and wars, total number of voters win elections, and political advocacy. That's one very durable answer. I'm going to explain to you in just a minute why. So should we organize for that? By all means. I've done it before in other states. It takes work, and we can do it here in Texas. Now again, in battle, we use intelligence. Not that the state, we use intelligence to exploit strengths and weaknesses of the enemy. Not that the state is our enemy, it is not. We gain many life-essential public services from state appropriations. The state is our friend, but not in this cause. In this cause, the state is our opponent. But we need to make a very clear differentiation that it is not, the state's not the enemy. The state is our friend in many ways, except for this cause. So, using that type of intelligence is typical. What strengths can we see looming ahead for us as we prepare for this issue, this fight for the state? Can anybody tell me? I mean, let's think. What intelligence looms out there ahead of us that clearly gives us an advantage against the state so that we don't continue hitting those stone walls? Statistically, in 2016, Hispanics will be the population majority in Texas. I'm going to say it again. Next year, statistics say Hispanics are going to be the population majority in Texas. Now, that is a crystal clear tactical and strategic political advantage. Does everybody here understand that? Good. Now, what do we do with that advantage? Do we organize it? Like our alliance, perhaps? Okay? You know, many studies have found that Hispanics don't organize too well. But what about us? Did we even blink when we put together our alliance here? Not even. It was unanimous. Not one dissenting vote in the floor of approximately 400 people. We probably have 500 or 600 here today if it hadn't been for the weather. That's unheard of. You did that right here in this conference center. Why? Why did that happen when political scientists and studies say it's not supposed to happen? Why did that happen? Why did we do that? Because we are a different generation of Hispanics and have had enough with a political ecology that continues to ignore our pleas for justice in this cause which we know deserves justice. And equally imbalanced is a state justice system that continues to ignore the same. And don't get me into Rule 92A. Or 91A. I forget what the number is, but I'll talk more about that later. I just learned about it recently. But now, is that over? I'd say just about. It won't be long before the powers that be are going to be seeing the beginning of their end. And you know how we're going to do that? We got to bring all of our kids into this meeting. We got to get all of our children to understand what the hell happened to us in the past. When we try and fight wars, this country never seems to learn from the damn previous war. We do the same stupid mistakes over and over again. We don't want to do that. So we need to bring our children into this and make it a complete cycle of information and education for all concerned. Our generation knows and understands how to dig out the facts and how to communicate. We're a different generation who will not accept injustice. We're going to light the fuse. We're going to fight with our superior numbers until we get justice. God gave us that opportunity. Now let me explain why and how. Hispanics, by maintaining family units that continue to produce children, we have achieved superior numbers in our population. Our family units are strong. So we owe it to our kids and next generations for them to know the truth about where we come from and make sure those mistakes never happen again. That's how God gave us the capacity in our time. It's happening now. And while before our ancestors were disadvantaged by language barriers and by incessant institutional racial discrimination, that is no longer the case. We have every opportunity to do exactly what we're proposing here now and change the outcome. Our time has come. We simply need to keep our noses dry and keep working. It can happen. Now, it is extremely important that I say what I'm fixing to say, and I beg all of you to bear with me and join in what I'm saying about the next generation. It is extremely important that I stop here to strongly emphasize something that is critical to our success and to the future existence of our children and grandchildren. Given success in organizing a voter bloc throughout Texas that becomes a decisive political advocate, and I see it, maybe not in my lifetime, but I see if we put the framework of this thing together correctly, I think it's going to get there. And again, let me reiterate, we have a decisive tack with the strategic advantage, right, starting in 2016. But if we organize and use it correctly, we must never become what our ancestors suffered. Never. We know the horrors of that treatment, what it feels like. So we shall never wish that upon any other human being on this earth. Am I correct about that? Do we all agree on that? No matter what the race or color, African American, Anglo, Oriental, Native American, Jewish, or Hispanic, never. Those who did this to our ancestors are dead and gone. The only justice they're going to know is what God is going to serve upon them if He hasn't already. Let the sins of those fathers rest upon the souls of their sons and daughters, and not ours. We never want to do the same thing just because we will have the opportunity to gain the upper. We will gain the advantage, and we will use it with dignity and honor and strength and righteousness. Never shall we use the upper hand to do what was done to us. That is wrong. And that's what I see with the radical side of some organizations that are trying to do what we're trying to do. And so, the long answer to the third question about how we will attain our goals, I've just spelled out what I meant by sheer determination. Our succeeding generations deserve to know the truths about our ancestors, and it is incumbent upon us to leave them that legacy, plus a fairly balanced political ecology that could bring justice in a modern solution that serves the common good. We talked about a modern solution earlier. One that doesn't threaten any race or class of people, does not displace any institutions as they exist today, but a solution that amends the values lost to our ancestors by the injustices they suffered. And that's not asking too much. I have much more to bring to you, your attention, but it's going to have to wait for a later date. And let me explain why. Today, I plan to give you a thorough rendition of the operations and planning of our alliance, its policies and procedures of doing business, but an unexpected opportunity presented itself. One that is rare in terms of information, so I postponed my presentation to make room for our next guest speaker, Mr. Jerry Patterson, Texas Land Commissioner, 2003-2014. Now, before I turn the mic over to him, I want to personally thank Jerry for his kind offer to visit us today. And man, let me tell you, was it a kind offer. He had to go through floods and rain and everything else to get here. And also, it is important for us to remember who our friends are, such as Jerry, who appeared here, and regrettably Mr. Benbach can't be here, but who appeared here at the very beginning of our alliance when we're getting it off the ground. We need to remember that. Jerry is one of those we need to keep in mind, especially after we begin picking up momentum, more momentum in the alliance and become political efforts. Now, as with any person that I invite to our council fire, I do a routine background check, from which I discovered that Jerry wrote an article, published in a Dallas newspaper, and I want to say this in case it's out there already, about Civil War subjects that drew some heated public reaction for his well-written narrative. In the service, that would be called drawing flack. Jerry drew a little bit of flack, and he had to defend himself for his opinions, and he did a tremendous job. I also learned that Jerry served in Vietnam as Lieutenant Colonel in the Marine Corps, which I can identify with and respect very much, and appreciate, along with his other achievements, not the least of which is his tenure as Texas Land Commissioner. And so with hope that Jerry may draw from his institutional knowledge of land grants, and thus enhance our knowledge, let's give Jerry Patterson a big hand for his kind gesture to be here with us, ladies and gentlemen. Great job.
Thanks, John, for the introduction. Most of what you said about me is true, but if it's good, I'll take it. I mean, I want to make it clear, I used to be somebody. I'm the former Texas Land Commissioner. I ran for another office unsuccessfully. But I will tell you that during the 12 years I served as Commissioner of the Texas General Land Office, I became aware of this controversy. I heard about it. I said, well, I'm going to go try to fix it. And then I found out it ain't that easy. It's really not that easy. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I build on the program as History of Texas Land Grants, but I looked at the rest of the program, and you have some experts that will be talking to you that know more about it than I do. So I'm just going to talk around the subject to some things that I think might be of interest to you, a little bit of history, also what I think we need to do and how I hope to help as we move forward. Let me say that as a politician, former politician, I recognize that politics is a derivative of two Latin words, poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning bloodsuckers. So, I understand the concept, and I understand the derision that many politicians suffer from their constituents. Some of it's well-deserved, some of it's not. I'll also tell you that I don't plan to talk long. It's my understanding I'm what's between you and lunch, and I believe in blessed are the brief, for they shall be re-elected. It's in the Bible. I know it's there somewhere. I can't tell you what the verse is. But we start out by saying that Anglos frequently don't get it. And it's not that they don't want to, it's just that they're ignorant of history. And it's not just the history that we're talking about here today, it's all kinds of history. They don't know how things evolved. They don't know what the background was. And not only Anglos, Tejanos as well. Texans in general are not aware of their history. And I'll give you an example of how this is a historical fact. It has to do with our Lady Governor of the great state of Texas. And I'm not talking about Ann Richards, I'm talking about our first Lady Governor. Some of you, I suspect, know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about a lady named Miriam A. Ferguson, initials M.A. They called her Mom. Now, her husband was a guy named James E. Ferguson. He was from Temple, Texas. They called him Paul. It was Paul and Paul Ferguson was a common descriptive term for the two of them. And Paul Ferguson was elected governor, I think, in 1916. Governor's terms were 2 years back then. And he developed a reputation for being somewhat of a crook. Matter of fact, Paul Ferguson supplemented his governor's salary by selling pardons. You know, if you had a relative in jail, you could trade a horse, or you could visit the governor's office in Austin and have a certain amount of money. But he was selling pardons, and this was commonly known across Texas. And there was a joke that was common across Texas as well, that if you ever bumped into Ma Ferguson and said, "Pardon me," she would say, "Oh, no, you have to talk to my husband about that." Well, Paul Ferguson was impeached and removed from office by the legislature for a variety of offenses. One of them was he had some funny bank dealings. Another one was he vetoed the appropriation for the University of Texas. The other one was he, was selling pardons. That was looked down upon somewhat. He was impeached, removed from office, and then we had Governor Hobby, not the one that you're familiar with, but his father, or maybe it was his great-grandfather, was a lieutenant governor. He became governor. And then about 6 years later, unbeknownst to Ma Ferguson, Paul Ferguson announces that Ma is running for governor, since he couldn't, having been impeached. And she ran against in the Democrat primary. She got to run off with a guy named Felix H. Robertson, who was the Ku Klux Klan candidate. She beat him in the runoff, and she was governor. Now, she was not very knowledgeable about public policy, but what I found in studying history, that there are really no new issues. There's not any issue that hadn't been before us at some point in the past. And today we have an issue commonly discussed and hotly debated about children who are primary Spanish speakers and how do we teach them. Today we say, well, shall we use the bilingual method or do we use the immersion method? This is not new. They had the same issue in the 1920s. They were asking the question, how do we teach children who are primary Spanish speakers when they come to public school? Back then they didn't say immersion and bilingual, they just said, do we teach them in English or teach them in Spanish? It was a commonly discussed, hotly debated topic even back in the days of Ma Ferguson. And this is a true story. Ma Ferguson was asked by a reporter how we should teach primary Spanish-speaking students, and she responded with what I believe to be one of the most infamous quotes in Texas political history when she was asked, how do we teach Spanish-speaking students? Governor Ma Ferguson said the following. She said, if English was good enough for Jesus Christ, it's good enough for the school children of Texas. Now, I don't know, Ma didn't know much about history. We all know, that Jesus didn't speak English. He spoke Arabic or some other language. But that was the attitude when I say that, that's what I mean when I say that Anglos don't get it. They don't know our history. And so we're kind of up against that a little bit. But the vast majority of people in Texas do not know what happened south of the Nueces River during the period, well, actually going back to the time of Mexico, but during the period of the Mexican Republic. Matter of fact, probably back in Spain, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, and the state of Texas. They don't know what happened. And so we're going to have to educate them somewhat on what happened and how that presents a problem and a challenge today that these folks up here in the Alliance, and John and others, are trying to correct. And I will tell you how difficult this problem is. I was elected land commissioner in 2012, and within the first 6 months, I had a visit from an attorney who was representing some folks, maybe some folks here, who had, he believed, a valid land claim on some land that had been stolen from them. This was during the time, I think this was either in the Republic of Texas or maybe even before then, maybe during the Republic of Mexico. He came in with a document. It was about that wide and about that tall, if I remember correctly. And it was in Spanish. It was very, very, very old. And our translator at the land office, when he translated it, confirmed that the attorney's translation was correct. And if the document was legitimate, it would have upset title. in an extremely large area south of the Nueces River. You know, some big names that you would recognize who have property there. Their title would have been in jeopardy. Now, why that came to the land office is under Texas law, if, and matter of fact, under Mexican law, Spanish law as well, the sovereign owns the land initially. In other words, the Kingdom of Spain, the Republic of Mexico, Republic of Texas, State of Texas. And then when they convey that land to a private owner, that first conveyance is called transfer out of sovereignty, and they issue a patent. When the land is conveyed after that, a title is issued, but the first conveyance is a patent, a conveyance from the sovereign to the first private owner. This document indicated that there was a different claim and that the current owners and their predecessors in title, because you have to not just worry about the current owners, where did that current owner get it from? And where did he get it from, or she get it from? And how many go back? The predecessors in title didn't own the land. Now, while the state of Texas has an interest in that, under Texas law, that would be called a vacancy. Usually, vacancies are areas where two surveys didn't actually butt together. And frequent, the surveys back then were they were primitive. You had all these people that wanted to kill you, whether it was Comanches, whether it was bandits, whether it was whatever. And you didn't really rudimentary GPS at the time. It was a rod, it was a horse, it was a compass. So there were a lot of surveys in which there were errors. And frequently you'll find, even today, a long strip of land between two surveys. And of course, that strip of land, since it was left out and was never actually conveyed, belongs to the state of Texas. And under state law, we don't question the surface ownership, but we own the minerals. And those who bring those vacancies to us under Texas law are rewarded with 1/2 of the mineral value. So there have people out there that are called vacancy hunters, and they look for these discrepancies in titles and in patents and between surveys and present them to the land office in hopes of getting some of those minerals. Well, anyway, this document came in. It was quite a shocking development. And I have a fiduciary duty as a representative of the state of Texas and the Permanent School Fund to go to the end of all these stories to the extent that we can. That would not make me very popular with some very powerful people in Texas. But nonetheless, we're going to get to the bottom of it. So my general counsel and this attorney took this document together on an airplane and flew to Chicago, where there was a laboratory analysis done. I'm not a scientist, but it was one of these analyses, extremely state-of-the-art. This was the best place in the United States. And what we found was that the paper was about 180 years old. But the ink was about 60 years old. And that also found that this document had been tested before. You can see where scrapings had been made. So what this document was a forgery from the 1930s or 1940s that probably was brought to the land office at that time. The land office ferreted it out and found out, no, it's not valid. And it probably had resurfaced more than once since it was originally forged in the early, in 1930s or 1940s. So that's what you're up against. The fraudulent practices have continued to this day. Now, it's become more and more difficult today because of all the scientific evidence that we can analyze documents and find out what's real and what's not real. But this problem and the story of the Nueces Strip continues to this day. I want to also mention that, and I think John touched on this, you got a couple of options here as to how you proceed forward. One of them is an adversarial Marine option. I'm a retired Marine, where you go, hi diddle diddle, right up the middle, we're going to kill all our enemies, et cetera, et cetera. And the other one is probably the better choice. You got to pick something that you think might have an opportunity to succeed. The adversarial, you need to do what you need to do to represent yourself, but being perceived as an unreasonable enemy is not going to help you get there. And we have a history. This is something that I talk about frequently to school kids and to groups of Republicans and Democrats who are listening. And it's about, there's tension sometimes in Texas between Texians and Tejanos. And there should not be. And one of the reasons there should not be is that we have a common history of working in the same direction. And that goes back a very long way. It goes back to 1836. I brought some documents that I will share with you here. But in 1836, did we have a war between Mexicans and Texicans or Texians? No, we did not. We had a war between tyranny and liberty. And I'll tell you why I say that. The tyrant was Santa Anna. He was the tyrant that abrogated the Constitution of 1824, which gave power to the people. He centralized all the power in Mexico City. And several states rebelled. Not just Texas. At that time, it was the state of Coahuila y Tejas. Texas rebelled. Another state, Coahuila rebelled in certain places. Zacatecas rebelled. So we know that Santa Anna came to the Alamo. We know what happened there. We know what happened at San Jacinto. But before Santa Anna ever left Mexico, he went to Zacatecas. And he killed 2,000 people, most of them non-combatants, to put that revolution, to put that rebellion down. Then he marched to Texas. And we know what happened after that. We also need to know that we talk about heroes of the Alamo, heroes that are heroes to all of us like Louis Crockett and Travis, but there were some others there. Their names were Esparza, Abanillo, Badillo, Espalier, Fuentes, Jimenez, Lozoya, and Nave. They were 8 Tejanos who died in the cause of liberty. And of course, Juan Seguin was there as well, but he left. He was sent out as a courier, and when he came back, the Alamo had fallen. We also need to know that our vice president was Lorenzo de Zavala, and that a signer of the Declaration of Independence was a guy named Antonio Navarro. We see the movies sometimes, and you wonder about the historical accuracy when you see the Alamo there, the Texas flag flying over the Alamo. The Texas flag didn't fly at the Alamo. The Alamo flag was the Mexican tricolor, and in the center white panel there were 2 gold stars, separate gold stars, because initially our revolution was to become an independent state from the state of Coahuila y Tejas. And then when we realized that wouldn't make any difference to Santa Anna, it became a revolution to completely separate from Mexico. But the flag that flew there looked a lot more like the one that flies in Mexico City than in Austin. And the other thing I like to point out, we have this hotly contested, extremely emotional, people spit at each other when they argue about it, discussion about illegal immigration. Well, this ain't nothing new. But the first illegal immigrants were people who had names like mine. And they weren't coming across the Rio Bravo or the Rio Grande, they were coming across the Sabine. And I give you a really interesting letter here. Before we became independent, we had an impresario system, and one of the impresarios that we all know about was Stephen F. Austin. Of course, he signed all of his documents, Esteban F. Austin, and all of his documents were in Spanish, because that was the business of commerce at the time. But on November 12th, of 1830. There was a law passed in April of 1830 in which the Mexican government stopped all immigration. It was immigration law of 1830. And no more immigration was what the Mexican government said. None. Stop. We ain't taking any more. Well, so then if you came across at that time, you were illegal. There were no passports. There was no way to get here. Impresarios couldn't even sponsor you. But on the 12th of November, 1830, a colonel in the Mexican army, Colonel Jose de las Piedras, essentially the Mexican Border Patrol, wrote a letter to Esteban F. Austin in San Felipe, in which he said that he had apprehended Americans Alexander Thompson, James Ledbetter, Thomas J. Wooten, John Sherman, Everton Kennedy, and their families, and told them that they could no longer come into the country and that they must return. The families negotiated and said, look, we're just here on some business, we will return, but can we go to San Felipe and finish our business? And he said, okay, fine, you can do that, take care of your business, come back in 20 days. Well, they never returned. Sound familiar? And instead, when Colonel de las Piedras, when they didn't show up, he writes this letter to Esteban F. Austin saying if they are there or if they show up, arrest them and return them over to me, or I will take them out of the country. My point is that illegal immigration has been going on all the time. It is a problem. It needs to be fixed. But frankly, screaming at each other is not going to fix the problem. About the problem that we're confronted with today, and by the way, one more thing I got this document. This is the immigration law of 1830, and I've got another one back here. These are in the land office archives, but this is a really interesting one. I've got it mounted as a copy, of course. This is the Board of Commissioners in the Bear District of 1838. And this was when we were a republic, we had all this land. We had a lot of debt, but we had land. And if you served in the army, or if you had come here at a certain time, you were entitled to certain amounts of land, whether you were farming or ranching, whether you were single or married. And so to prove that up, we had these commissions that met at various places. So this is the one that met in San Antonio de Bejar. And it's a list of all the claimants here. And if you go down this list, you'll notice that every Anglo name next to it says immigrant. Every Tejano name, it says native. And there's also a pretty poignant name on the list. The name Juan Seguin is listed as John Seguin. Appeared on the same day as did David Crockett. Well, that doesn't make any sense. This is 1838. Crockett died in the Alamo in 1836. If you look a little farther, David Crockett was represented by his son and his executor. They were there on the same day, Juan Seguin and David Crockett's son. And you wonder if Juan Seguin and David Crockett had a conversation, because Juan Seguin was one of the few people alive that had seen David Crockett right before he died. It was just a poignant thing. But the lesson here is that immigrants were people with names like mine. Natives were people with names like yours, unless you want to go back a little farther, and they were names like Ponce de Quartet, who was also known as Buffalo Hump, the Indians that we displaced. So what do we do moving forward? What I suggest you do, the first thing I will tell you is that I offer my services. I'm not going to charge you. I believe in your cause. You know, when the legislative session comes to town, and we all run for cover if you live in Austin as I do, this needs to be addressed. But there's only two ways it's going to get fixed. And it's not going to be fixed to everybody's satisfaction, in my view. The legislature is going to have to do something, or the courts are going to have to do something, either before or after the legislature. And frankly, when I was land commissioner, and there was something that was a very difficult issue that involved two parties, I would frankly, in fact I did this one time, I would like to go to court, because then the court tells me what to do. I don't have the option. If you have a fiduciary responsibility, if you have a financial responsibility to your office, in my case I had a financial fiduciary responsibility to the permanent school fund. I had to defend the permanent school fund at every turn, even if I thought it was wrong, even if I thought our position was the wrong position. My fiduciary obligation would not allow me to say, we're wrong. And so I would frequently welcome a challenge in court, because in the court you tell me what to do and I'm off the hook as a fiduciary. See, I'm not a legislator. I don't set policy. I have to operate under the statutes and the Constitution. So, the state, as John said, is not the enemy. Our current comptroller, Glenn Hager, I know him, he's a good man. He wants to do the right thing. Whatever amount of money is currently in the unclaimed property, the mineral-related unclaimed properties in the area of the old land grants, whatever amount of money in there, and I've looked at the report, you need to look at it, it's said to be $400 million. Whatever amount of money there is, he does not want to avoid distributing it to the rightful owners. He would love to get rid of it, but he can't just start writing checks until there's something that tells him this is what you shall do. He does not have the discretion to just start writing checks. And that's something that tells him this is what you need to do, write this check or disperse these funds. It's going to come from a legislative action which sets up some kind of process, or it's going to come from a court of law. The other problem that the comptroller has in this is that, okay, let's assume that we've got 200 valid claimants. Do we divide the $400 million among 200 valid claimants? No, because those 200 people that are valid claimants, you know there are more. You know, there are thousands of folks, if in fact this justice was done, this injustice was done, and it was, so you can't just start writing checks. You have to have something that tells you how to distribute, to disseminate, and disperse those monies. The comptroller doesn't have that discretion. So the legislature is going to have to come up with a process. I would also recommend that for those of you that haven't read it, and John sent it to me, it's electronically available, maybe y'all can post it somewhere where people can look at it, is that report. Now, it's 111 pages long. I just printed off the summary and the recommendations, which are about 15 pages. But it's called the Unclaimed Mineral Proceeds Commission Report, December 2014. You need to read it. You really need to read it because it will save you time. And this unclaimed report talks about the charge of the commission, which was narrow, focused on those monies that the comptroller had that are ready for disbursement to a valid claimant. You need to read this. It will save you time. It will allow you to focus your argument. It will allow you to focus what you choose to do. But I'm sure it's online. I bet if you just Google Unclaimed Mineral Proceeds Commission Report, you can find it. I recommend you do that. Anyway, thank you for having me speak to you. I know your cause is just, and I'll also tell you that your cause is going to be a very difficult one. It's been a very, very, very long time. And there are many folks who are not with us anymore who are both victims and perpetrators. But this is about now. What can we do now? And how can we achieve that? So thank you for listening to what I have to say. I take a question or two if you like. And, thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm sure there's going to be many, many more opportunities. There's some very key words that Jerry mentioned today. He wants to help. Doesn't want anything for it. He thinks the cause is reason enough. That's fantastic. I regret that Jerry didn't hear the fact that we picked on the Unclaimed Mineral Proceeds Commission and the Unclaimed Mineral Proceeds Fund. I'm sorry, I got a question from Nick. Go ahead.
Yeah, what can we tell the company of the report? Can we get it off the website?
It's on the website, and I plan to put it on the, if I haven't put it on the web yet, Troy, remind me, we'll put it on the web.
Okay.
It's 150 pages, that's we can do that. It's the final report from the Unclaimed Minerals Proceeds Commission. And if you have any problems locating it in the next, it'll be about 3 weeks before you put it on the web. Just call me and we'll make sure we get you connected to it. The big problem is going to be downloading it. Troy, can we do that?
Yeah, I'll just point a
Can we
link.
set it can we put it in a format that they can download?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, okay. Good. Okay, there was one question for Jerry that was asked, and we sent it to him. Jerry, are you prepared to answer it, or can you?
Well, I can answer the question, whether it's accurate or not, my answer, but anyway, no, I'd be happy to try. If I can't answer it, I'll find somebody that can, and I'll get the information to John. Was there a question? Oh, over here.
You mentioned when you talked about the list of immigrants, you said it was 1838, and David Crockett's son was an immigrant, and he probably was a native. Does that mean that in 1838 he was still Mexico?
No, this was merely this was a list of folks who appeared before the Commission of Land Commissioners in the Bear District in 1838. And when it said native citizen or immigrant, that was merely a nomenclature for what their origin was. So in 1838, we were obviously the Republic of Texas.
Wasn't the Republic sovereign itself? Was it no longer?
It was sovereign. Yeah, the Republic was sovereign in 1838, yes. That would have been, that was the sovereign.
Okay, so you were a sovereign recognized by different countries like France, England, and
I think by 1838, I know we were recognized by France. In fact, France was the first country to recognize the Republic of Texas and had a legation in Austin, which is the oldest resident still in Austin. But I believe by 1838, we had been recognized by several other countries as well. Yeah.
There wasn't any conflict with international law?
I think countries have the discretion to recognize who they wish to recognize, and I don't know what international law. I'm over my head talking about international law.
Because, I mean, that's supposedly it was under the conditional, when you became the next administration, so it was under conditional. Because Mexico was still coming into.
Yeah, Mexico was still claiming. I mean, Mexico didn't cease their claim to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Yeah, they still claimed it, that's correct.
Because the Republic was out too, correct?
I didn't hear you.
Well, the Republic was, when it was annexed, it was in 1845. But in 1838, it wasn't considered as it was still considered as Mexico.
Well, in 1838, the Texans and other foreign governments considered it a republic. Mexico in 1838 did not.
Was that because of the treaty they signed?
Santana, the treaty that he signed as he was a captive, and one of the reasons Sam Houston didn't assassinate or didn't kill him as many wanted was to get him to sign a treaty to leave, to stay up, take his army home, and to recognize Texas independence. The disputed area was that area south of the Nueces. The boundary was set in 1848 of the state of Texas, and then again in 1850. The boundary was modified.
Yeah, when it was modified, that was like.
Yeah, in 1850 we lost our panhandle and went to Wyoming.
As far west as you might, would be back here.
Well, I mean, I don't know the concern of this group. There were things that happened that are not to be proud of much later than that. But that's not the, you got to focus. You have to focus because you can't slay all the dragons. You got to figure out what dragons you're going after. And if you're going after the ones, the titles that were fraudulently acquired or conveyed during the period of the Republic, the laws of today are what apply to your cause. And they're not necessarily different than the laws back then.
Okay, that, for example, wait. I remember the Florida. Now, that was a island. That was an island, right? It wasn't a land. So,
No, yes.
here in that era, that the Republic gave up land all of that. What would those lands be?
The land strips, you were, for example, these folks here that presented themselves to prove up their entitlement to land did not get land. They got a grant of land or an entitlement to land. The burden on them, and this was common, I believe, whether it was, although Spain and Mexico may have done it differently, but I know for a fact that Texas gave you a land certificate that entitled you to a section or a league or a labor of land. They didn't survey it. They didn't plot it. They gave you that document that was yours. You had to locate the land, which was, you had to locate unsurveyed land, unlocated land, and then you had to survey it. And then you took those field notes to the general land office. The general land office checked to see that your claim was not on top of somebody else's. And then after that, it was patented. Even though you owned it and had a superior ownership right than anyone else, until it's patented, it is not conveyed from the sovereign. And when I was commissioner over the last 12 years, the commissioner executes the patent, and you send it over to the governor, and the governor executes the same document. We had land that had been in ownership, private ownership, for over 100, and maybe even more, 120, 130 years. It had been conveyed to successive owners, but it had never been patented. And the patent was final when I signed it and when, at that time, Governor Patterson.
So what is actually the most legal document that is done? The original land map or a Texas land map? Because the original land map is Southern, and the land map is
Well, in theory, there should be no conflict, because Texas recognized Mexican land grants by law. The legislature recognized Mexican land grants, and I assume also Spanish land grants.
exactly, but see, that's what our situation is here. When the common law is very different than the Spanish. So we lost a lot of our rights on the common law. They didn't learn that. So we lost a lot of our inheritance law, more so than anything else. Because a lot of our language are protected. We're not supposed to have, I have conflicts of the language. I have the last one testament. And it seems very clear that it's a perpetual land grant for the successors. It doesn't say anything about the time. So when you give a land patent, it's under the laws of the state of Texas, very clear. It's very different than the land time. The land time is for perpetual for successors. And there is a law in Mendoza, 17, sure. Land grant cannot be sold out of the family.
Oh, conditional, yes, okay. It's a conditional grant with in other words, it was never completely conveyed. In other words, in those circumstances, you never completely owned it. Because if the sovereign gave you something and restricted your subsequent conveyance, you were never a complete owner. That's like having a land on a property.
It was just an abuse for that term.
I don't know.
Successors.
But for example, if I were to sell somebody some property and say, you can only sell that to me, I have not conveyed all of the real property rights that I possessed if I had put a condition on it. It's similar to minerals, it's similar to water. You know, real property is a bundle of, the term they use is a bundle of sticks, and you can sell some of the sticks or not some of the sticks.
See, that's no thing. But in this case, he purchased it, and he took possession on his property, and he threw it to the four winds, the wind, the air, the stone, the grass. So he was legally given that land by purchase, and someone else had. So, see, the law's there. So there was no, because you know that Spain signed another treaty before. So in that, he himself has his sovereignty. The land there.
And it's also unique to the Spanish land grants, in which the sovereign owned everything. And I think I know where I'm going. I think I'm learning here. But the king was the owner of all. He owned the entire domain. He could give rights to use something that he really continually retained title to. So if you got a grant from the King of Spain, my hunch is that you got a grant, you could use it forever, but it still belongs to him under the rules of
No, but he did say that you can do whatever you want, you can close it, and you can do whatever.
you can do whatever on the property you wish to do, but
You can ever do, and it's private land.
yeah,
But the line is attached to the soil, it needs to spend 100 days.
yeah, I don't know, I'm over my head here, but I do know this, that
Go into the line, you have to ask permission from the owner of the soil. So it did not.
similar to today. That's similar to today. Yeah, but the point is that the sovereign retained, and also sovereigns seldom, if ever, in Mexico, of course that was, in Spain, sovereigns always owned the minerals. That was something that the family was.
But you gotta go by the laws when you gotta given at that, not what it is now.
But you have to also remember, you can never convey something you don't own. And that's one of the problems. Yeah. I'm not an attorney. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
You can tell from this exchange the benefit that the Alliance gets by having Jerry provide information for us. So just keep that in mind when you compare the other organizations. Now, there's a lot of questions I have, but I don't want to bury Jerry at this time, nor do we want to discourage you from coming back. A land grant is the most powerful ownership tool ever in existence. Now, how that's conveyance was changed and manipulated by the state of Texas, there's a bunch of chicanery that happened. So Jerry, of course, has to provide the, how can I say, the institutional side. He doesn't know everything that you know. So it's a matter of putting us together and then coming up with a plan to try and find a solution. And as I mentioned to you, there's solutions out there, but they're not simple. And it's not going to be easy. But I think we're determined to do that. And this alliance, I think,